that we've kind of characterized the detoxification that it can occur during a fast, but also there's an enhanced introspection during a fast.
Exactly.
And fasts are not always exclusively detoxification. So especially for people who have done some of it and they've gotten some of the crud out of their system,
Right.
then when you start doing fasts, it becomes more of a psychological experience and less of a physical experience. And I think it's very interesting, people who, advocates of fasting, who are discussing long-term fasts, where you go past 5 days maybe.
Yeah.
Then you're not only discontinuing food, but you kind of want to discontinue all external stimuli as much as possible.
Yeah.
So it kind of really lends itself to meditation. It becomes a very introspective experience. And there's a kind of shift in your experience of time. Because you when you're doing this, you don't have responsibilities. You're separated from all this external stimuli, and there's a sweetness to the passage of time. There's a kind of an abiding, a restfulness.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, really beautiful.
Yeah, see, the problem is it's also anti-capitalist. I mean, capitalism, they want us to just be plugged in, working all the time. If we're not working, we're going on vacation somewhere. Or, the idea of just taking, time and spending it, in relaxation, in a restorative fast, it's very anti-capitalist. It's totally, the guy from True North said, it's very hard making money off of fasting. It's much easier to just sell people drugs, Making money off fasting is tougher. So that's why, I feel like it's this incredible truth that is just suppressed. There's no way to make a profit off it. So, the only way to get the information is through, people on YouTube talking about their experiences,
Well, it's incredible, Barry, and there were many people in the history of natural hygiene who ran facilities who had to continually fight, forces that would either try to shut them down, lawsuits. So
Yeah, look at Loren Lockman. He was practicing in Maryland. He had to take it down to Costa Rica. Or look at Herbert Shelton. Herbert Shelton was a convict. He went to jail for doing fasting for people.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And I'll tell you, I had a friend, not a close friend, but a friend who had been diagnosed with some kind of cancer. So she was doing the chemo route with her doctors, and you know what the chances of success of that are, and then the side effects and everything.
Yeah.
And so I was telling a mutual friend of ours about Loren Lockman. And so he pulls him up on the computer, and then the first thing he sees are, negative characterizations of him, and immediately he thinks Loren's this kind of whacked out dude and way off the grid.
Right.
This is the kind of thing that's so frustrating. This is what I mean about the Cassandra. It's like the truth, you tell people, and they look at you blankly as if you're some kind of nutcase.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very tough. It's a tough road to hoe. Somebody was telling me, he doesn't know how people like Herbert Shelton, when there was nothing like YouTube.
I know.
You and I have this conversation. This is good. We can say, hey, fasting is good and get some support. These guys were just out in the dark.
I know.
With nothing.
And Barry, sometimes it makes me mad that it's taken people like Dr. McDougall, Dr. Esselstyn, T. Colin Campbell. These are folks who are recognized within the established medical community. And now because they've got some data and they're respectable doctors, their word is taken a little more seriously. Still they're fighting a battle.
Yeah.
But it bums me out that these dudes like Shelton and a lot of these guys back then who were promoting this, they were considered quacks, They
were considered quacks.
Yeah.
Quacks, yeah. Well, the internet is a tool for communication, and I do think the truth comes out. It's very hard because you have all these capitalist influences, spreading misinformation and what have you. But I do think people will I think the truth will come out. I mean, that's my prayer, that people, I mean, my prayer is that somebody with cancer will come onto YouTube, or some friend of theirs will see something on YouTube that talks about the vegan diet, the benefits of the vegan diet, the benefits of fasting, the benefits of non-traditional medicine, and, you know, someone will be saved by that information. And I know it happens. It's just, I mean, a very small number, but people, the information is coming out there. I mean, it's definitely, you know, since it's so easy to communicate, I think it's easier to get other opinions out there other than, you know, the establishment.
I think you're right, and I think we're in a good place. I think it's gonna happen. I think it's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
So I think it's really exciting. I think we're going to witness a significant transition in our lifetime. So I think that's positive. But I meant to. Well, I keep remembering that you had something. This was on the spiritual side of things. What was the other topic that you wanted to?
You know, one thing I wanted to mention. I read. This is kind of. Can you see this book? It's called. It's
I see an author, Emmett Fox.
Yeah, it's Emmett Fox, The Sermon on the Mount, and I read this book recently, and this is a great book. I know you're kind of into Advaita and kind of Eastern Hindu kind of religious ideas, and I was doing yoga for a while, and I did do some reading in that area. I'm basically a Christian. I'm a practicing Christian.
Yeah.
And one thing, you know, I really love the something called the Sermon on the Mount. It's the Gospel of Matthew, chapters 5 through 7, 3 chapters.
Yeah.
And Emmett Fox does a great job of going through these 3 chapters and saying, you know, how it can really change your life. And it's all basically about, you know, living selflessly. And it's a great read. I mean, if you're interested in spirituality and Christian, you know, the idea of Christianity, it's a great book to read. Really love it.
Can you quote for us a couple of the verses in the Sermon on the Mount?
Well, there's one that I really loved, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I had a quote here that I wanted to read, and it's from, hold on, give me 1 second.
Yeah.
And it's so helpful because, you know, a lot of times people struggle with, can you still see me?
Yeah.
A lot of times people struggle with, how do we know the truth, right? And there's this quote from Matthew, it's chapter 7, and it's 5 verses. Let me just read the whole thing for you, all right?
Okay.
This is Jesus, and he's talking to his disciples, and he says, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. And he says, are grapes gathered from thorn bushes, or figs, or thistles? So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will recognize them by their fruits. And, you know, what Emmett Fox kind of said about this was, you know, this is really how you figure out if something, like, it's hard to figure out what the truth is. You know, there's so much information and so many opinions out there. And basically what Jesus was saying here is, judge things by their fruit. You know, and the fruit is, you know, you do something and see what happens. And if it's good, then the thing that, you know, the advice was good. And if you follow some advice and you get a bad outcome, the advice was bad. So it's a real simple idea, but I think it's valuable. It's hard to know what the truth is. You know, you have to do it. You have to learn through experience. You have to make mistakes. You know, that's how you grow, by making mistakes, trying different things. Don't get too hooked up on, you know, what one person says. Like, if Lauren Lockman says it, it must be the truth. I mean, that's not necessarily true. You know, if Barry says that it's true, you know, if you say, Paul, it must be true because you're a good guy and you know everything, you know, I don't know, we're all human here. And I'm sure some of the things, you know, I've made videos where I go back to those videos, I'm like, geez, I'm not sure that was such a great thing to say. So,
well, I like what you're saying, Barry. You're reminding me of another biblical line, by their works ye shall know them, or maybe it's by their fruits ye shall know them.
yeah.
And yeah, it's just totally true. It's totally true. And it's a nice caveat you're including here, which is nobody's perfect, and we should all use our own kind of discernment and judgment to assess things for ourselves. And like you've been saying this whole interview, experience is a great indicator whether something's valuable or not. But I do think there's a kind of scale of maybe, I don't know if good and evil is the right term, but, you know, it's funny. Ignorance and evil, they're kind of similar. I mean, many times ignorance is just, it's there and it's not somebody's fault. It's a kind of ignorance. But, you know, when you see something like this, these tests, these statistical analysis that are funded by organizations that have a vested interest, and you have professional statisticians working on these who perform, they make adjustments within the study to reflect certain outcomes that are beneficial to a particular vested interest. I mean, that's either ignorance or intentionally misleading people.
Well, it's definitely intentionally misleading people. I mean, I'll give you an example. Like, you know, a lot of things in the pharmaceutical industry, you know, they have one version of the drug and then they come out with a better version. And doctors start prescribing that better version. And typically what they might say is, okay, so we have drug A, and that was effective, but this new drug is 20% more effective than the last one. You know, that's pretty good, 20% more effective. That's great. But if the last drug only helped 1% of the people and the new drug only helps 1.2% of the people, well, that's a 20% improvement. But if you don't understand the language of statistics, I could just tell you, like I could say, yeah, this new drug is 100% more effective than the last one. And it went from 1% to 2%. You know? Yeah. So you have to, it's very easy to mislead people with language and, you know.
Yeah, and I just want to get back to what you were saying, you know, by their works you shall know them. You know.
Yeah.
What is the fruit? What's the fruit of these vested interests? It's a sickly population and a destroyed environment.
Yeah.
And I like that you're highlighting the Sermon on the Mount. I'd like your perspective on this. You know, communism, the way it evolved in the modern day, was essentially totalitarian states calling themselves communist,
right, but
asserting a, you know, totalitarian regime.
Yeah.
And I don't think those are the same thing. I don't think communism is really, in its ideal state, a totalitarian regime. But I do think what Jesus was advocating, what Jesus was inviting, was something very close to an ideal form of communism, it seems to me.
Well, he talks a lot about living a very simple life, you know, and, you know, the idea is always, you know, if there are other people that are struggling, you know, you're going to help them. Like, you don't, the idea that you would hold on to a lot of wealth while other people are starving is that's a really problematic idea. And, you know, that gets back, you know, it's very hard to talk to Christians about eating meat or not eating meat. But, you know, one way that you have to phrase it is people are starving because people are eating meat. I mean, we easily have enough food to feed everyone in the world. I mean, there's no such thing as a hunger problem. You know, that's a joke. There's easily enough capacity to feed everyone. The problem is we feed 70 billion farm animals as well as this, you know, and then we don't have enough to feed the 7 billion people. So, I mean, if you're really Christian, if you don't want to live in ignorance, you know, the fundamental idea of Christianity is that you have to care for, you know, you love God and you care for your fellow man. for other people. And in this day and age, in the Bible, back in the Bible, when we had like 1,000th as many people, I mean, there's just a fraction of the number of people that we have now. Back then, maybe people could eat meat, but with 7 billion people, we can't do it anymore. And if you really care, if you don't want to see other people starving, you can't say from your castle, we got to do something about these starving people. You have to live a simpler life yourself, and people, religious people, they don't get that. This is as far as they see it. God said animals are resources for us. They're something that we can use, and we can just do whatever we want. God made the animals for us, so we're allowed to eat them. And there's no forethought of, oh yeah, but we have starving people. There's a huge portion of people starving in the world because of our actions.
Well, I love this notion that I sometimes hear about within the Christian community, which is proper stewardship of the earth. When I hear that, I'm like, yeah, Christians are on the right track. Stewards of the earth. We are responsible for. That there's a pile of plastic in the Pacific, I guess it is, that's the size of Texas. We're responsible for that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I like this idea of stewardship, and it's a very odd thing that Christianity has become, in a way, tied up largely in this kind of right-wing worshiping of capitalism. Laissez-faire capitalism, which it's not even. It's not. It's the capitalism that we experience is not some kind of free market. It's powerful interests manipulating the market.
Yeah, I think one problem that Christians have. I don't know. I don't want to say anything negative about people, but there's so many forces for misinformation. You have to be curious, and you have to really try and figure out what's going on in the world. If you're just passive, you're going to be subject to a lot of misinformation. If you're passive, you're just going to get this message like, just consume, just keep eating the food that we give you, eat the meat, eat the packaged food, watch TV, watch football, don't think about things too much. And I think a lot of Christians fall in, it's a trap. It's like mental laziness. Like you just take the messages that are transmitted, they're very comforting, eat it. Food that's bad for you is very comforting. You can just eat it and you'll feel good and you don't have to think too much about things. And I think a lot of people fall into that trap.
Well, it's complicated, Barry. I mean, you have these cultural threads that connect food and religious belief.
Yeah.
You go to. It was common for Christian families to go to church on Sunday, go home and have a Sunday dinner. It's complicated. I think you're right. I think that's the key. It's like people need to wake up and know what the consequences of their actions really are.
Yeah.
It's like what's this line? If slaughterhouses had windows, nobody would be eating this stuff.
Right.
It's like.
But you mentioned that idea of like stewardship. That's not a real common idea among Christians.
Uh-huh.
I mean, if it was, then the logical thing would be, hey, we're not taking care of the planet. I think more common. I don't know. I don't see a lot of like environmentalists in the church.
Right.
There's not enough.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm really encouraged by this new Pope, Pope Francis, and he's actually doing I think it's an encyclical this summer that's going to be on the environment. So I'm not sure if what his take is on. I doubt he's going to do anything in terms of meat eating, but he's at least aware of the environment, and he's pushing for a more egalitarian-oriented Catholic body,
right.
if you will.
Well, I think he's a Franciscan, right? Or which means he follows St. Francis of Assisi, who was vegan and who never would eat an animal. And I think he does have some concern. I mean, if you look at the poor, if you look at the plight of the poor, eventually you come back to meat eating is the major problem there. You know, that's a
now break that down a little bit. Why do you say that?
I'll give you an example. If you look at the Amazon, right, and you take an indigenous group of people, they're living in the Amazon, they're self-sufficient, right? If you come in and clear them off of that land because you want to plant soybeans, you clear them off, you move them to a slum, they're done. They're going to be poor, they're going to be starving, they're going to be criminals, they're going to be prostitutes. That's it. Their life is over once you move them out of their natural environment. And that's what's happening in Brazil. That's what's happening in China. In China, in India, people are moved off of their natural land a lot of times by big corporations who want to do industrial strength agriculture. They clear them off their land, then they're destitute. I don't know. That's one example.
Yep. Yeah, I think.
And let me give you another one. If you look at some place like Somalia, right? Somalia is like, there's so many terrorists, so much terrorism, and the place is a mess, right? People don't really talk about the fact that big fishing industry came in and cleared out the ocean. I mean, Somalia is a fishing country. The people exist along the coast. It would be small little fishermen who would go out in their boats, catch fish. That's how they lived, okay? But then you'd have all these big fishing boats that would come in and just clear the oceans of the fish. They just destroyed the fishery off of Somalia. And then surprise, surprise, then people started to become terrorists and have wars. And I'll give you another example. People talk about the war in Syria. Nobody mentions the fact that there was like an agricultural drought right before the civil war in Syria started. There was a drought, and they had a really bad growing season. And then what happened? People started fighting, for their rights because people were ripping them off. The government was ripping them off, and so. I don't know. I think like poverty and it's related to the way we eat and the way big businesses are kind of exploiting the poor people of the world.
Excellent points, Barry. Excellent points. You wonder when wealth gets so stratified and such a large quantity of the world's wealth is concentrated in so few. I mean, you could easily feed and house people with that money, so it becomes kind of an ethical, moral stand. But it's like, it's kind of like it's become the status quo, so people just let it happen that way. It's like, and I guess I'm participating in that. I'm not out in the streets, asking for revolution. Maybe I should be, but.
Well, I think one dangerous point is a lot of people in America would say, oh man, look at those 1%ers. They are just screwing up everything, right? Those wealthy people are just taking advantage of everybody. They're just destroying, making life for the poor bad. But if you go and look at the poor people, they're pointing at us. It's not the 1% in America. It's America in general. It's me. I'm the one who's exploiting the poor. If you're eating, if you're eating meat, you're exploiting the poor. All right. If you are being vegan, you're being a lot better. You're exploiting the poor a lot less. But Americans use so much oil. We fly all over the place. We're exploiting the entire planet. I mean, you have got to, if you really want to have a clear conscience, you've got to live as simple as possible. Live simple like the people in Nicaragua are living. I saw this video recently living on $1 a day. I mean, if you really want to point your finger at the wealthy people, make sure you're pointing it at yourself and you're living as simply as possible.
Yeah, it's a great point, Barry. It's a great point. If anyone's been to third world countries, if you go into someone's home, you'll realize that pretty much, a large percentage of Americans are very wealthy compared to global standards.
Yeah.
Now, still, having said that, I do think there is this thing of the 1%, and I do think there has been this shift of wealth away from the middle class towards the wealthiest, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
But I think you're pointing at something too. There has to be a transition inside all of us that values our human brothers and sisters anywhere they are as much as we do ourselves.
Yeah. 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 I guess my point is always look at yourself. That's really, that's what you can change. But yeah, there's this stratification of wealth. The 1% has gotten insanely wealthy. It's really bad. But I don't think that's why we have global warming. I think we have global warming because of our eating habits, and I think the poor are suffering so bad because we're exploiting fisheries around the world. Like when you have fishing boats all over the world, going out into places where poor people live, taking all the fish and bringing it to the United States, and the people in those poor countries are starving. There's something wrong there. I don't know. That's...
Oh, yeah. And not to mention, a lot of the goods we buy are, made in countries where, the conditions are questionable. Now it's a complicated thing, because I recently heard a piece about, I think the author of the piece, the journalist, interviewed women who are working in Chinese factories.
Yeah.
And these women are thrilled to have these jobs, and they're moving up through social strata by having these jobs. So it's complex.
It's tough. I gotta wrap it up soon, but we're like opening a can of worms where it's like another 3-hour conversation about. Well, let me just ask you this question: are people living on a few dollars a day in a local community where they interact with each other? Are they less happy? I don't know. Are people in capitalist societies more happy? Are they?
No.
It's a tough question. It's a tough question.
No.
I know if you're starving, if you expect, if you live off the fish and then there's no fish and you're starving, that's not a good thing. But I think there's a lot to be said for a simple lifestyle, a community-based lifestyle. I don't know.
I'm in 100% agreement, and I think that's true. I witnessed that when I went to India many years back, and I was way up in the north in the mountains. Some very traditional agricultural communities there. Some of the happiest people I've ever seen. Very humble, hardworking, simple lives. They had enough food to eat. They had shelter. They were the happiest people I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But
what's
that?
If you can live in if you can get enough food, if you have a local community. I look at like these people who live on like Pacific Islands. They're very isolated, but they have community. They have enough food to eat. They seem generally pretty happy. I don't know.
Yeah. I think I'll just lastly say, it's something I probably said in other interviews before, but I think what we're going to see happen is a merging of this technological development and social spiritual consciousness, a merging of these two. And as this occurs, there'll be a transformation in the way we interact with each other and the way we interact globally. I think we're on the verge of something very positive. It's just about to happen. So I'm hoping
you got to make some videos on that and map out the transition for people.
All right.
You got to put put out a 10-step plan for people. You want to hear can we just wrap it up with this? I made a 10-step plan. You want to hear what it is?
Yes, I do. Yes.
10-step plan for health. This is everything you need to do. You're coming from the standard American diet. You want to get to the Lauren Lockman, the Shangri-La diet and perfect health. Here's how you do it, right?
All right.
You stop eating meat, dairy, and processed food. That's number 1. Okay?
Good.
Then you stop using tobacco, alcohol, drugs, and pharmaceuticals. And caffeine is a drug, all right? Then you drink the distilled water, all right? Don't drink the fluoridated tap water. It's poisonous. Drink that distilled water. And then get sunshine. You got to get a lot of sunshine. Move someplace tropical. If you're up in New Jersey, forget it. You can't do it.
Out of luck, Barry. You're out of luck, man.
Yeah, I got to move. I'm trying to convince my wife to move. And then you get 30 minutes of exercise every day. And then I have here eat as much fruit and leafy greens as possible. That's number 6. Number 7 is you have to have some kind of spiritual practice. I really think this is essential for health. I don't think you can really be healthy, and I'm sure an atheist would think I'm a quack, but I think you need to have some kind of a spiritual practice. And then I think number 8 is I think you need to practice some form of dietary fasting. Just figure out what it is. If it's juice fasting or, for me right now, I'm kind of into the intermittent fasting, some form of fasting. And then I think you need to breathe as much fresh air as possible. That seems very simple, but actually what I wrote is breathe deeply and as much fresh air as possible.
I think that's,
so, I don't know.
That's
maybe
very
that's
sound. That's very sound.
And the last one is you have to limit your exposure to capitalist culture. I just think in general, if you watch television, it's going to pollute your mind. It's going to turn you in an unhealthy direction. It's going to turn you onto products that are unhealthy. Just limit your exposure to capitalist society, and cut off your cable. Don't watch movies. Just cut your exposure, and you'll be better. Just watch this guy's videos. All right.
I like a lot of what you say.
10 cents.
I don't know. I think I agree on the water that tap water is not the best. I used to drink distilled water, and I always found that it was a little flat. It doesn't. There's something kind of missing from it. So I would say if you can get like a reverse osmosis, that's the ideal. Reverse osmosis water purification system. But if you can't do that, distilled's very good, very good.
Okay.
And
well,
on the
let me just tell you one thing. Sorry to drag this on too long. Let me just tell you one thing about distilled water.
All right.
So I bought a water distiller, right?
Yep.
And basically what a distiller is it's this big container that boils the water, and it has this lid, and the lid catches the steam and it condenses it through like a cooling coil.
Yeah.
And it drips out into a glass jar. Okay.
Yep.
And so what I would do is I would take the tap water, I would put it through a Brita filter. So I would filter it, and I would pour the filtered water into this container where the distilling happens. You run the distiller, it evaporates all the water off into the glass jar. Now what is left over in the distiller is disgusting. It's like a muddy sludge. I'm telling you, this is water that I filtered. I poured it in. I could wipe it off. It's just like a mud. I don't know. I don't want to. When I look at that, I'm like, I would not want that in my body.
It's a great point, Barry. I agree. That's pretty strong evidence there. Yeah. Yeah.
And if you don't believe me, there's other YouTube videos where people go through. They show you their distiller. The one guy said there's like a sludge in the bottom of the distiller after you run it.
That's a great point. It's a great point.
So, I don't know. Maybe your body needs that sludge. I don't know. I don't think so. And my water, I don't know about you, my water's fluoridated. I mean, they put fluorine in my water.
Well, yeah, and the recent thing I heard on this was that there was a Nazi plan to use fluoride in the water to keep the populace dumb.
I don't know what the plan. I don't know what the justification is.
This whole thing that fluoride is necessary to make your teeth healthy. That whole thing is totally questionable. I mean,
no, that's propaganda.
Yeah. So I mean, hats off to you. I think it's good. I'm probably too lazy to do distilling again, but I think that's a good incentive to not have that sludge going through your body. That's
yeah. I don't know.
But Barry, so great to chat with you, man.
Yeah.
Great topics.
Yeah. Great.
So thank you so much, and
and thanks for your channel. Thanks for all the great interviews you do. It's I had all these ideas. I'm like, I could make a bunch of videos out of it. I could just call Paul. Let's just talk it through.
Dude, that's cool, man. I'm totally up for that.
No. I think you get through the ideas better with the discussion. Sometimes the monologues, it's just kind of like, they're snoozers, they just sleep.
Absolutely. Yeah, the human element, that's one of my big things. Vegans are human too,
Yeah. All right. Hey, good luck to you on your channel.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much, Barry.
All right.
Take care, my friend.
All right, take care.